Hey, A10, it's the end of Miracle Worker. We completed Acts 1, 2, and 3 as of today, and congratulations. We've learned some sign language and uh, through the American Sign Language program, the basic spellings for certain words. I showed you today how to do some sign language for basic words instead of just spelling it out. And it's been awesome to see you practicing those movements with your hands to spell out those words and communicate, just like Annie and Helen are doing. And so please keep that up. That's a great skill to have, and continue to practice with your alphabet, so that when you do have that opportunity to speak with somebody who has that challenge of not being able to hear, then you can be able to speak with them and have that communication, that two-way communication with them. So I hope you enjoyed the play, and appreciate your feedback on how the play was presented. Obviously, I would have preferred to have had people perform the play, but hopefully with me reading it, you were able to follow the narrations and the dialogue fairly well. And so any feedback that you have, please pass it on to me so I can decide how I can improve upon it for next time when I teach this course. Okay, so I'm just going to go over the slides one last time, and we will be taking Act 2 and 3. So if you need to fast forward and stop or whatever you need to do, please do. And thank you to all those who have subscribed to Heskin ELA. I appreciate that. And hopefully you've checked out the other videos that are available and some of the audiobooks that are available as well. And let's get into sharing. Where is it? Here we go. All right, so this is the end of Act 1, and I talked about the ladder, and especially where the individuals are on this hierarchy. We see that Helen is above James on the various different rungs on the ladder, and James, I put him above the servants, but you have to wonder whether he is maybe closer to Annie in regards to hierarchy, because both Annie and James are perceived by Keller as, I guess, in a way inferior in their own respective right. James wants to be that son, the accepted son by his father. Even Keller admits that he wants to have a relationship with his son, but doesn't know how to do that. Doesn't know how to make those connections. And when you look at it, the relationship between James and his father Keller, and the connections they're trying to make, then you also look at the connections that Annie and Helen are trying to make. She spells, M-I-L-K for milk. It has a name. There's a connection to it. And so that relationship there and the relationship with Keller and James, pretty much a mirror version, just different ways of how those connections are not being made relationship wise anyways. So let's get to the first set of notes for pages 41 to 45. I've been encouraging you to paraphrase these summary notes, as it will be an important skill for you to take the information that is being taught in your courses, highlight those key points, and be able to articulate that into a paraphrase format, so that you know exactly what is going on at that specific time in that chapter or act or movie or whatever you're responding to. We start off with a letter. We talked about the how Annie writes each letter. She looks at each letter to be sure that she's written it correctly. She puts commas after each one. Now, albeit that is incorrect in regards to grammar and mechanics, or the mechanics of writing, but because she is blind, she's separating each item to stress those words and get those ideas out. Helen comes in. We have the spilling of the ink, and keep in mind we talked about the bottle of ink back in the day where they would dip a pen, the tip of a metal blade into the ink and then write their letters. They'd have to let the ink dry, of course, and before they would be able to mail their letters to whoever they were going to mail it to. And then, of course, if we go back further in time, we have quills and feathers that were sharpened, and then they would dip that into the ink to do the writing. Then ink's all over the place. Helen spells out ink, I-N-K, and that has a name, but it doesn't click for Helen. It's just another mess that needs to be cleaned up. Helen gets cleaned up, and she's given a sewing card, and she actually learns how to do sewing after Annie showed her how to do it. She was able to model that quite well, so that's a skill that she's learning. But what that connection is, like what is she actually doing, that's missing. So it's one thing to mimic or copy, but can you make the connection to what it actually means? What is she creating and things like that? There's a bit of a battle for that doll, because Helen wants the doll. And her family's let her have whatever she wants. And Annie says, "No, you're not getting the doll until you can spell doll." So the D-O-L-L, and make the connection. That's the doll, right? And so we have bad girl and good girl and things like that, just to keep things relatively simple. And then we have Kate wanting to learn about, to learn some language so she can speak to her daughter. The next page, set of pages, we have rehashing of old Civil War battles. That seems to be the only conversation that James and Keller have as a father-son. But when it goes back to that relationship of, I want to be your son. I want to be acknowledged as your child, and that you do have another child. Keep that in mind. It never becomes a reality anyways. Even though both do want to have that relationship, they just don't have, they don't know how to get there yet. Supper's there, and of course Helen's grabbing at the food, which is a normal behavior that they've just the family has just kind of just gone with, and they allow her, as long as they can have a conversation, an adult conversation. And he's like, this is chaos. Like she's just doing whatever she wants. She has control over these adults. It's not the adults over the control over the child. It's Helen has control over these adults. So basically, Annie says, I've had enough. I want you all to leave. We're going to, I want to take Helen. I'm going to teach her how to eat like a regular person, with a spoon or fork, and dishing it up from the plate and eating normally, or the definition of their normal. And then, of course, how to fold a napkin. So the respect that you should have it at the table when eating. So, of course, everyone else is in an uproar. They get sent out. Annie locks the door. And of course, Helen wants out of there. She doesn't want to have anything to do with it, because now her audience is gone. The next set, we have we get into Annie's going to make her eat. Eat with a spoon or eat with a fork. And Helen starts throwing, every time she gets a fork or a spoon, she throws it. And there's a battle royale that takes place. And eventually the battle royale happens. And then we get into the moment. This is the moment where finally a connection is made and she's able to eat and she's able to fold a napkin, okay? And when Annie says that she was able to eat and fold a napkin, Kate focuses on the napkin. That was the big one, because that is a sign of courtesy or respect, especially in a society or in a family that's so high on status and representation and things like that. She was able to fold a napkin like a lady, right? So she's hung up on that. Everybody else says, folding a napkin's nothing. Well, it may be nothing to you, but for Helen to do that, that's a major accomplishment. That's a jackpot win there. Okay, so Kate's so happy about that. And especially where Helen makes a connection when she touches her mother's face, which is very common to feel the contours of the face. And we did that activity of you drawing your face on a piece of paper just by, through that tactile response and figuring out what does your face look like when you draw, when you feel those key parts of your face and the contours and then translate that onto paper. It's a challenge, but you did a very good job with it. We have a flashback experience, a lot of those happening where Annie's still struggling with her past, but she draws strength from that past as well, so she can overcome her challenges that she's going through. And even though it's painful, you can draw strength from those experiences. So she is able to do that. Towards the end of the act, we have differing opinions on how things have been going. Keller wants Annie gone. Kate wants to keep her because she is starting to do something like fold a napkin. Well, Keller is like, folding a napkin's nothing. And we'll find out later on, Aunt Eve feels the same way later on too. So Keller wants to get rid of her. And then they also contemplating sticking Helen in an asylum, and Annie puts her foot down and said, you don't want to send your child to an asylum because if you're going to do that, you've lost her completely. Keller tries to assert his status as a man, as the head of the household, and Annie's, she stands up to him, which was very uncommon at the time. And so we find out in Act 3 that Keller calls Annie a tyrant, and Annie in turn calls Keller a tyrant. So it's like they're both there's a bit of friction there, and they're both trying to assert themselves, and so it just comes down to who's going to concede and show some humility in the short term and eventually long term. We have an agreement where Annie's going to take Helen for 2 weeks and try to teach her as much as she can 2 weeks. And so the Kellers give up their child to Annie. And that is a big it's a big decision, but it's also a difficult one because parents giving up their child, it's emotional. It can be like you're giving a part of yourself away to a total stranger. Maybe Annie's not a total stranger at this point, but she's not family, right? And so that took a lot of guts to give up your child to somebody else in the hopes that you're going to be able to reach them, teach them, and then make those connections. Keller and James try to reconcile, I guess would be the best way to describe this scene. But James, it's almost like he's given up on his father. He's tried to emulate his father, be like his father, make connections, in things that his father likes, but in turn, his father has not returned the favor by listening to James, seeing him and hearing him. So in a way, James is seen but not heard. So we have Helen, who is deaf and blind. Keller and James are experiencing the same thing. They're deaf and blind in regards to the relationship. They're not listening to each other, and they're not seeing each other for who they are, and that as father and son, or even as adults. The end of Act 2, we are in the this summer home, I guess we'll call it, and so Helen doesn't want to have anything to do with Annie after that battle royale, but eventually she is coaxed into joining Annie by with the lure of cake and milk, and Percy is used as the mediator on that one, and so eventually we spell CAKE. And milk, and so they have a name, so they're able to make those connections. But Helen doesn't understand that yet, or it's not clicking yet, and so Annie is continuing to affirm herself that she believes that she can reach this child, and eventually she will make those connections. The act ends with Annie sitting on a rocking chair, rocking the doll that Ellen loves to hold as a child, and sings "Hush, Little Baby," and Annie's starting to make a connection with Ellen, that maybe she does love Helen. Not as a daughter per se, but someone who she can love as a person. And I guess we'd have to see whether in Act 3 maybe she does view Helen as a daughter, or a surrogate daughter anyway. So we'll see what happens here. In Act 3, a very short act, we have more words being spelled, like they all have a name. She keeps saying mug, M-U-G, and G, and we have that has a name, and there's a connection there. Can you see it? And James submits to his humility and apologizes to Kate the way he's been behaving, and he says, he reaches out to Kate, saying, "Hey, I'm trying to reach my father, but I just can't. Since I've made a connection with you, can you be my friend?" And so Kate says, "I already am. I'm your stepmother, and I am your friend." So I guess that James will have to be satisfied with that for now. Kate and Keller want their daughter back, and rightfully so. Helen does belong to Kate and Keller. Annie wants more time because she still hasn't made those connections, but the family wants their daughter back. So Annie has to concede. So they go home, and Annie receives her first paycheck, but albeit the paycheck is great, but the ultimate paycheck is when the teacher sees the student learn, that they get it. They made a connection to what was taught in class. And they've been able to see beyond. We talked about that connection with the giver in grade 9. If you're able to see beyond, if you're able to take that step forward and apply, it's an application to real life. So taking what you learn from the text and applying it to real life, taking what you learn from the text and making connections to the history, the context of the time, and where we're at now and where we're going in the future, those kind of things. James finally stands up to his father. We get that. And because Helen goes back home and she's testing the family. She returns to kicking and all that kind of stuff. And Helen's a smart person. Annie knows it. But the rest of the family is like, she's home. That's the main thing. But Annie wants to maintain the consistency or the things that they've achieved up to this point. And eventually the egg will crack. The bird will come out, or the chicken will come out and be able to eventually fly. And so a lot of metaphors and analogies mentioned there. And Annie does get permission to take Helen out, and they go fill up a pitcher of water at the well. And once the well, she's making a connection like this is the well, and then the water, Helen says wah wah. And remember Kate said the very first word she said at 6 months old was wah wah. Like she made a connection that wah wah is water. So years later, she's able to make that connection, wah wah, water. And then all of a sudden it's like the light bulb came on and she's able to spell all these. She can spell stool, step, trellis, all teacher, mother, all those kind of words, and make the connection. And so Annie calls everybody out, and they're like, "What's going on? What's going on?" She did it. The light bulb went off, and so Helen's just spelling and making connections. It's like taking the ball and spelling the ball. So BALL. And making the connection. She knows what this is. And she goes to her mother, and you would think she would spell mother. She spells teacher to her mother. And the mother is happy but sad. Happy that she's able to do all this stuff, but sad that she did not, her first word when making contact with her mother, her first word was calling her a teacher. And then Helen goes back to Annie, and Annie's like, I finally made a connection with you, and I can view you as my daughter, not my biological daughter, but my adopted daughter, I guess, so to speak, or my surrogate daughter. And so she says, "I love you, Helen." She spells that out, and Helen understands that. Okay, she understands that, and then that's the end of the play. Okay, so that's the Miracle Worker, and I hope that you have enjoyed the play and also enjoyed learning another language. And hopefully maybe you can take the training for that and be able to speak that second language or third language or whatever, and be able to reach out, teach one, reach one, and make those connections. That's the key there, is making the connections. Don't forget your major project has 3 questions. If you're going to do that, why you did what you did, how did it help you understand the text, and where did you get it from? That comes with the major project. And if you're going to choose the minor projects, you have the visual written and written. So visual writtens are dioramas or drawings or posters or charts or anything like that with a written explanation. And then of course the written part two of that minor project is either an essay or response or editorial or anything else that's in the written format to show your comprehension of the text. Okay, teaching a skill activity is half marks until Monday, and your summaries and those 7 questions in your course online booklet should be submitted tomorrow, Friday. All right, so that's the end of Miracle Worker. We have a special guest coming in who works with the school division about sign language. And so we're going to learn a lot about that tomorrow. And then we'll be viewing Miracle Worker itself and finishing up our second half of the blind deaf activity. So if you were a guide the first time, you will now play the role of the blind deaf individual and vice versa. If you're a blind deaf individual in the first time, you will now be the guide. And we'll do that. And that will be the end of Miracle Worker. Then we'll get into Ender's Game. Okay. Don't forget your research paper is also due December 6th. And I think that's about it. EdSP is available to everyone now. So please log in. Be sure you click the SPSD authentication button as well in order to gain access with your student number and password. And I think that's about it. So I know it's a long video, but this is the end of the play. So come talk to me if you have any questions. All right. Take care. Be safe.